Have you ever wondered why the moment a woman stops trying to be understood, the masculine begins to unravel? He calls it confusion, resistance, manipulation, but in truth, it is initiation. Because silence, when it comes from a woman who has met her shadow, is not absence. It is a mirror, and a man cannot win against what reflects his own unseen self. For centuries, the masculine has believed the game of love is about conquest, to pursue, to win, to dominate, to claim the feminine as a prize that proves his worth. But the feminine does not belong to the world of trophies or victories. She belongs to the realm of mystery. Her power is not in what she gives, but in what she withholds. Not in how she explains, but in how she becomes. And this is where his ego begins to collapse, because the game he plays was never meant for her. The rules he clings to, charm, logic, persuasion, disintegrate in the presence of something older, deeper, untamed. He meets a woman who no longer plays by the scripts of compliance. She listens but does not chase. She feels but does not cling. She withdraws her emotional labor like a queen withdrawing her court. And suddenly he feels small. His words echo into her stillness, unanswered. His tricks lose their shine. He senses, perhaps for the first time, that he has never truly known a woman. He has only known projections of his own desire. The ancient texts spoke of this as the descent into the feminine underworld. Jung called it the meeting with the anima, the inner woman every man fears and secretly longs to meet. When he cannot possess her outwardly, he is forced to confront her inwardly. And that confrontation is terrifying. Because what she awakens in him is not just attraction, it is exposure. She exposes the hollowness of his control. She reveals that his strength, built on dominance, is brittle. And she does it not with aggression, but with absence. The feminine wound is different. Where the masculine fears rejection, the feminine fears abandonment. She has been trained for centuries to soothe, to appease, to hold space for everyone but herself, to make herself smaller, softer, safer, so that love will not leave. But when she begins to integrate her own shadow, the witch, the siren, the queen, she learns that love cannot be sustained by self-erasure. It is only born from truth. So she stops rescuing him from his discomfort. She stops explaining her silence. She lets him sit in the echo of his own projections. And that is the shadow game. Not to punish, not to manipulate, but to reveal. Every time a man tries to dominate a woman who has integrated her darkness, he is really wrestling with the part of himself he cannot accept. The part that longs to surrender but fears annihilation. In myth, this is the story of Persephone and Hades, but reversed. She is no longer the abducted maiden. She becomes the queen of the underworld, descending by choice. She does not fear the darkness, she reigns there. And he, the self-proclaimed ruler, begins to tremble, because she sees him more clearly than he sees himself. You can feel this in your own body when you stop over-explaining, when you no longer try to justify why you're withdrawing, when you let a man face the void he created by not seeing you fully. At first, it feels cruel. Then, it feels sacred, because silence in this context is not rejection, it is reflection. It tells him, here is your own emptiness, sit with it. And if he has the courage to face it, he may evolve. If not, he will call you cold, distant, heartless. But those are the names the wounded give to power they cannot understand. In Jungian language, this is the confrontation with the shadow, what the ego refuses to see. The man sees his own dependence, his hunger for validation, his terror of losing control. And the woman, by not feeding that hunger, becomes the mirror that forces him into individuation. This is why she cannot lose, not because she dominates him, but because she refuses to betray her center. Her silence becomes a throne, her stillness a weapon, her gaze a mirror. Tonight, perhaps, you will feel the temptation to explain yourself again, to fill the quiet with words, to prove your innocence or soften your truth. But try this instead. Sit in the stillness. Feel how vast it is. Feel how it draws his projections like moths to a flame. You owe no translation for your sovereignty. Because the feminine does not win by playing his game. She wins by ending it. The shadow game begins when she no longer seeks to be chosen. Because that is the moment she becomes the chooser. Men who are ruled by ego do not fall in love, they fall into projection. They do not see her, they see what they need from her. Validation, softness, surrender. They confuse her attention for affirmation of their worth. And when she withdraws that gaze, it feels like death. But that death is sacred, because the ego must die before the soul can awaken. A man's deepest wound is not the loss of love, it is the loss of control. The masculine shadow feeds on certainty. If I can predict her, I can possess her. If I can possess her, I am safe. But when the feminine steps out of that predictability, he faces a terror older than language, the chaos of not being in command. And yet this chaos is divine. It is the crucible in which real masculinity is born, not through domination, but through surrender to what he cannot own. The feminine does not conquer him by power. She initiates him through paradox. She gives him what he desires, a sense of connection, by first taking away what he craves most, control. In myth, every hero who meets the feminine in her full expression must face this collapse. Gilgamesh met the goddess Ishtar and refused her, only to be cursed into despair. Odysseus met Circe, the enchantress who turned men into beasts, and only when he humbled himself did he regain his humanity. The lesson repeats. The man who resists the feminine shadow becomes enslaved by it. The man who faces it transforms. The modern man calls this mind games. But there are no games, only mirrors. What he interprets as manipulation is simply reflection. He cannot tell the difference between her stillness and rejection, because he has never known love without performance. And she who has walked through the valley of shame, who has faced her own need to please, knows this truth intimately. She once made herself small so he would stay. She once softened her voice, dimmed her light, compromised her truth. But something inside her broke, quietly, beautifully, when she realized that no amount of self-betrayal could guarantee love. That fracture became her rebirth. Now when she withdraws, it is not out of cruelty, it is remembrance. A remembrance of the power she had forgotten. The power to create silence, so profound that it forces truth to surface. He will call her mysterious, detached, maybe even cruel. But that is only because he has mistaken constant access for intimacy. He cannot yet see that her absence is not a wall, it is a doorway. A threshold he cannot cross until he, too, meets his own shadow. Every archetype of the empowered feminine carries this lesson in her bones. The witch who stands alone in her wisdom, untouched by flattery. The siren who calls men not to pleasure, but to transformation through desire. The queen who rules not with noise, but with presence. Each is misunderstood by men who still operate from their wound. Each is feared because she cannot be managed. And yet each is necessary, for without her, the masculine never matures. The feminine's shadow power, whether it manifests as silence, absence, or rejection, is not punishment. It is the alchemy of truth. When a man loses a woman like this, he does not lose a possession. He loses the mirror that could have made him whole. But if he is wise, he will learn. If he is brave, he will descend. And what about you? You who have been told that withholding makes you cold. You who have been conditioned to fear being called too much or too distant. You who have bent yourself into shapes just to be seen. What if the real power lies in not performing at all? What if your silence is not absence but presence? Not a void but a field, magnetic, alive, sovereign. The witch archetype knows this. She does not chase, she conjures. She does not argue, she observes. She does not beg to be understood because she understands herself. Her energy is not persuasion, it is gravity. And gravity never chases. When you hold your silence from a place of wholeness, not fear, not punishment, but truth, you become untouchable. Not because you reject love, but because you no longer accept love that costs your peace. That is the secret men cannot win against. Because the game they play depends on reaction. And the woman who no longer reacts has already won. So when he pulls away to provoke, do not reach out. When he tests you with distance, do not rush to fill it. When he calls you detached, smile inwardly. You are not detached, you are detached from illusion. This is how the feminine reclaims the throne of her psyche. Through silence, through absence, through mastery of her own emotional gravity. Tonight, notice where your energy leaks into the need to be seen. Notice the impulse to explain your value. And then do nothing. That is the beginning of power. When the feminine stops proving, the illusion of control collapses. And what's left is truth. This is the moment when many men feel their world tilt, because the energy that once sustained them, her constant reassurance, her laughter, her softness on demand, is gone. What remains is a silence that stretches like eternity, a silence that exposes his inner emptiness. He calls it rejection, but it is revelation. He begins to chase, not her, but the reflection of himself he lost when she stopped being his emotional mirror. Every message he sends, every attempt to regain her attention, is not love, it is panic. Because when the feminine withdraws her light, the masculine realizes how dependent he had become on her reflection to feel alive. This is the masculine shadow, the hunger for validation disguised as confidence, the need to feel powerful by being needed. Jung saw it as the immature animus, the part of man that feeds on external recognition instead of inner purpose. And when the feminine awakens, he faces that shadow in its rawest form. The feminine silence forces him into confrontation with his own void. Her stillness is his initiation. It says, if you cannot love me without control, you do not yet know love. And this is why men fear her silence more than her anger. Anger can be debated, appeased, countered. But silence cannot be argued with. Silence is pure reflection. It has no edges to grip. It is the mirror of eternity, and only the soul can stand in it without shattering. The woman who has integrated her shadow knows this. She does not use silence to punish, but to purify. She does not need to prove her love through constant reassurance because her presence alone has become the embodiment of truth. She no longer bargains for connection. She simply is. But this kind of stillness is born through fire. It comes after years of self-abandonment, after lifetimes of being told that her worth is measured by how much she gives. She had to learn the art of not chasing, not begging, not performing. She had to learn that the one who rushes to be understood always ends up being consumed. And in that realization, she met her own shadow, the part that feared being alone, the part that equated silence with rejection. She faced it, held it, and then transmuted it into sovereignty. Now her silence is sacred ground. When he looks into her eyes and sees no plea for validation, only peace, he feels his ego tremble. Because ego thrives on transaction. It knows not what to do with a love that is free. This is where many relationships falter, not because love is lost, but because the illusion that sustained it has dissolved. The woman is no longer a reflection of his worth. She is a reflection of his soul, and that reflection is too raw, too honest, too confronting for a man who has not met himself. He may pull away seeking a softer mirror. He may project, saying she is too proud, too distant, too self-contained. But the truth is, she is simply no longer available to his shadow. She has become a queen. In Jungian terms, the queen archetype is the mature form of the feminine, rooted, radiant, self-sufficient. She no longer seeks validation from the masculine because she carries her inner king within her psyche. She is whole, and that wholeness disarms the half-grown man who still seeks to dominate rather than meet. Her throne is built of boundaries. Her crown is her calm. Her silence her command. And to the man who has not yet individuated, she seems impossible to win, because he mistakes her peace for pride. He does not yet understand that she has already won by integrating both her tenderness and her fire. To the feminine listener, this is the medicine. You are not here to be chosen. You are here to remember that you were never lost. Your stillness does not repel real love, it filters it. A man who cannot stand in your silence cannot hold your soul. A man who feels threatened by your calm has not yet met his own. And your task is not to soften for him, but to deepen within yourself. Sit with the ache that arises when you stop explaining. Feel the emptiness that comes when you no longer reach for validation. That emptiness is not loneliness, it is your throne. In the quiet, something ancient awakens. The witch, whispering that wisdom is more seductive than availability. The siren, reminding you that magnetism is born from stillness. The queen, showing you that love is not found in chasing, it is found in choosing. The shadow game ends when you realize there was never a game, only projection, seeking itself in another. Tonight, feel the pulse beneath your skin and know, silence is not passive. It is active creation. It is the womb of becoming. When you stop reacting, you start ruling. In every era, the awakened feminine has been misunderstood. They called her cold when she became calm. They called her manipulative when she became intentional. They called her dangerous when she became sovereign. But in truth, she was simply remembering. She was remembering that her energy was never meant to be a performance. It was meant to be a presence. The shadow game, this quiet, invisible alchemy between masculine and feminine, is not a contest of dominance. It is a dance of evolution. Each time he tries to control her, life gives him another chance to awaken from illusion. Each time she withholds her energy, she strengthens her center and teaches her nervous system safety in solitude. This is how the polarity between them becomes a crucible for transformation. But only if they both stay conscious. Because unconscious men will always interpret her sovereignty as rejection, and unconscious women will mistake his fear for authority. He will say, "You're so distant," when what he means is, "I can no longer extract my identity from your reaction." She will say, "You make me feel unseen," when what she means is, "I've forgotten that I can see myself." And when they both awaken to these truths, the battle dissolves. He learns that love does not require possession. She learns that peace does not require permission. This is the Jungian dance of individuation, the merging of opposites within. The masculine learns humility, the feminine learns sovereignty, and together they ascend beyond the shadow. But first, there must be collapse. Because no ego surrenders without a fight. The man feels her silence like an earthquake beneath his feet. His identity trembles. The validation he once received from her gaze has been cut off. He feels powerless, exposed, perhaps even humiliated. But that is the gateway. That is where his soul begins to breathe. The masculine must learn what the feminine already knows. That true power comes not from control, but from presence. That real love cannot bloom in dominance. It can only grow in truth. And the feminine, too, faces her test. Can she stay rooted in her stillness when he projects his fear onto her? Can she resist the impulse to soothe his ego back into comfort? Can she let his discomfort mature him rather than rescuing him from it? This is her initiation into the priestess, the one who holds sacred space without bending to chaos. She knows that silence is not a void but a vessel. Within it, transformation brews. In mythology, it is Isis mourning Osiris, not in hysteria but in sacred focus, that brings him back from the dead. Her grief becomes prayer, her stillness becomes magic. The masculine resurrects through the feminine's unwavering presence, not her panic. And you too hold that power. When you stop over-explaining, something shifts. When you no longer rush to be understood, your energy becomes magnetic. People begin to feel you rather than merely hear you. Men feel both drawn and unsettled by your calm, because calm cannot be controlled. That is the essence of the shadow game. To mirror what is unconscious, not by words but by being. The modern world has conditioned women to equate availability with worth. Always online, always responsive, always pleasant. But the feminine that has done her shadow work no longer confuses attention for love. She no longer seeks validation through constant access. She becomes like the moon, sometimes visible, sometimes hidden, yet always whole. And that rhythm, that refusal to always be available, is what awakens the masculine to his own rhythm. He cannot rush the moon. He can only align with her cycles. So when you withdraw, do it consciously, not from resentment but from reverence, not as punishment but as purification. Your silence teaches both of you where projection ends and truth begins. He may rage against the loss of control. He may accuse you of indifference. But beneath that anger is grief, the grief of the boy who was never taught how to hold mystery without needing to own it. And through that grief, the man is born. This is the hidden beauty of the shadow game. No one truly loses, because both are being initiated into depth. He into humility. She into sovereignty. The ego resists, but the soul rejoices. So tonight, when silence stretches between you and another, do not rush to fill it. Feel its sacred weight. Feel how much power is hidden inside the quiet. Every second you hold your center, you become more magnetic, more mysterious, more yourself. Let the world call it cold. You know it as clarity. Let him call it distance. You know it as devotion to your truth. Because in the end, it was never about winning the game. It was about ending it by stepping out of illusion and into self-possession. And so it comes to this, the end of the game, where illusion collapses and only essence remains. For lifetimes, the feminine has been taught to survive by self-betrayal, to make herself digestible, to use her beauty as currency, her kindness as leverage, her vulnerability as proof of worth. She learned to perform softness while swallowing her rage, to forgive too soon, to explain too much, to accept too little. But there is a breaking point in every woman's journey, a moment when she realizes that peace built on suppression is not peace, but paralysis. That to always nurture without boundaries is not love, but loss. And when that realization dawns, she does not rise with fury. She rises with stillness. That is the final form of the feminine shadow integrated. The queen who no longer fights for recognition because she is recognition itself. Her very existence radiates authority, not through dominance but through equilibrium. She has mastered both presence and withdrawal. She can vanish without disappearing. She can peak without words. She can love without losing herself. This is the endgame the ego cannot comprehend, because the ego lives through reaction while the queen lives through resonance. The masculine ego seeks to provoke, to dominate, to elicit a response. But when she remains unshaken, calm, aware, open yet unyielding, it collapses his illusion of control. He stands before her and feels for the first time the vastness of true feminine power. It does not shout, it does not chase, it simply is. And in that stillness, he has a choice. He can turn away, resentful, calling her too much, too difficult, too mysterious. Or he can face himself. If he chooses the latter, he begins his own descent, the journey Jung spoke of as the integration of the anima, the inner feminine. He learns to love without possessing, to lead without controlling, to desire without devouring. His strength becomes service, his authority becomes awareness. He becomes a king, not through victory, but through humility. And she becomes what she always was, beneath the layers of pleasing and proving, the axis of her own universe. Her silence no longer hides pain, it expresses power. Her absence no longer means rejection, it means discernment. Her mystery is no longer defense, it is devotion to herself, to truth, to the divine rhythm of becoming. This is the secret of the feminine. She rules not by force but by frequency. She does not need to convince or conquer. She simply aligns, and alignment is irresistible. To every woman who has felt unseen, understand this: your stillness is not emptiness. It is your crown. Every time you choose not to explain, not to chase, not to shrink, you return another piece of yourself to the throne. To every man who has felt disoriented in her silence, understand this: her quiet is not an attack. It is an invitation to meet yourself, to stand unarmed before what you cannot control, to learn that love is not ownership but awareness. The shadow game was never a battle between man and woman. It was a mirror designed by the soul to bring both back to wholeness. For she holds the mystery, and he holds the motion. She is the moon, he the tide. When he tries to command her rhythm, he drowns. When he learns to move with her, they rise together. The woman who embodies her silence teaches by example that love begins where need ends. That connection cannot exist where there is dependency. That desire becomes sacred only when filtered through self-respect. And this is the ultimate paradox. When she stops chasing, she becomes magnetic. When she stops proving, she becomes unforgettable. When she stops fearing her own darkness, she becomes luminous. The queen, the witch, the siren, the priestess, all faces of the same truth. The feminine is not meant to be understood. She is meant to be met. And only a man who has faced his own shadow can meet her. So, to you listening now, sit in silence tonight, not as an escape but as initiation. Close your eyes and feel your own gravity. Notice how the world bends around your calm. Notice how your breath slows when you stop reaching. That is not loneliness, that is sovereignty. Because the woman who has mastered her silence no longer asks, "Will he return?" She asks, "Does this vibration serve my throne?" The woman who knows her worth doesn't chase. She chooses.